Welcome once again to Strictly Speaking here on True Blue. Good to have you aboard. I am Bob Frantz. Today we are featuring a guest a little bit out of the ordinary just because we don't do a ton of country music stars. As a matter of fact, John Rich is the first country music star that we have done since we started this show. And it's really a perfect one, though, because it does fit with the theme. John Rich is more than just a country music star. He is a patriot. He is a philanthropist. He likes to help organizations like the Travis Mills Foundation. You saw the first episode we did of the new show with Travis Mills. So when you get an opportunity to talk to a country music star with a big heart and a big cause, you take advantage of that opportunity. Now, before we bring him in live, let's watch this.
Hey, Christmas times are coming, folks. And guess what I'm doing just for you? I am hand signing a bunch of bottles of Redneck Riviera American blended whiskey. We're going to make them exclusively available on redneckriviera.com/whiskey. Send it right to your house and guaranteed to be there in time for Christmas. So I got a lot of labels to sign. It's going to be very cool. Hope y'all are doing well, and stick a little Redneck Riviera under your tree for the redneck in your life. God bless you. God bless America. Merry Christmas.
Easily the first guest we've ever had signing bottles of whiskey on his way in the door. Let's welcome John Rich from Redneck Riviera to our program on Strictly Speaking. John, how are you, man? Merry early Christmas to you. Thanks for coming on. How are you?
Merry Christmas to you, Frank. Thanks for having me on. Been looking forward to it.
It's Bob, actually, is the first name, Bob Frantz.
Oh, sorry, Bob.
That's okay. We haven't met yet. Now we have. So
I was going off of an email. My apologies.
Not a problem at all. Man, this is such an honor to have you here. I am such a big fan, not only of your music, but what you do and how you do it. So love the Christmas greeting. Love the fact that you're signing whiskey for your fans and for your friends. And you got a big event coming up, by the way, right? On New Year's Eve. I saw something. Ryan, throw that up there, I think, too. You got a big New Year's Eve bash going on at the Nashville Redneck Riviera, right?
Oh, we never let an opportunity go to waste when you can celebrate your freedom, as we call it, celebrating your freedom in America while we still have it intact for the moment. So, yeah, we're going to have a big party New Year's Eve. And, thanks for the shout out to the brand there. That whiskey is now generated in give backs. It's generated $1.6 million back to the Folds of Honor since 2018. So when people order those bottles, man, it really makes a big difference to a lot of folks.
I didn't even ask you yet about some of your philanthropy and your charitable work, and there it is. First thing we talk about. I didn't know that was a thing, man. I didn't know that money from your whiskey was going to Folds of Honor. That's such a great thing, and it's literally what I just started with. You take your role as a celebrity in the country music world or whatever world it is very, very seriously. You seem just bound and determined to do good with your name and with your celebrity. Where does that come from?
Well, listen, we live in America, and I come from the school of thought that freedom is not inherited, freedom is earned, and it's earned decade by decade by decade. It has been since the beginning of our country. And my history, I don't have any fancy pedigree. I grew up in a double-wide trailer in Amarillo, Texas. My dad is a street preacher, prison preacher, style minister, and I have a high school diploma. That's the extent of my education. So when you get to go pursue happiness in America, which is an inalienable right listed in the Declaration of Independence, when you have the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I'm well aware as to why a guy like me and a guy like you and everybody else watching still has the ability to pursue happiness. And it's strictly one thing: men and women willing to serve our country and sacrifice and die if necessary to make sure that those rights remain intact. So that's why we look for ways to serve the people who have served us so well.
Does that mindset come from the fact that you have been successful in your chosen career? And I'm wondering, if you weren't John Rich, country star, if you weren't doing what you do, would you feel the same way? Do you feel like you would have a calling to something like this if you didn't have celebrity on your side?
Yeah, it wouldn't matter what I was doing. If I was selling used cars or teaching school or whatever, you're still alive and free in America. Why do you think there's millions of people lined up at our border willing to do whatever it takes to get in this country? Why wouldn't they pick another country to do that? Because America is the only country on the planet and in the history of nations that has outlined the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness By inalienable, meaning they're not rights granted to you by the government or granted to you by man. They're granted to you by God himself. You're born with these rights. The United States respects that fact. They recognize that fact that you're born with those rights. So those rights are actually more in concrete than the Constitution itself or the Bill of Rights. Like, these are inalienable rights. So yeah, it wouldn't have mattered what I wound up doing in my life. I would have searched out ways to serve the people that serve our country. And you know what? Millions of people do that. People that aren't famous, people just regular folks going about their lives, working hard, raising their families. They'll find a way to give a little bit here and a little bit there when they can, and that adds up. That's what Folds of Honor is all about. There's millions of people that donate to that organization. I'm just one of their more outspoken, high-profile guys, but that organization puts kids through college who lost a parent in combat. I mean, can you think of a stronger way to say thank you for your service than to look after someone's kids? As a dad myself, that's the strongest thing you could ever tell me, I can promise you, is, John, if something happens to you, we'll look out for your two boys. So that's Folds of Honor, and that's why I support them like I do.
Yeah, I love that. I love that message. And it's personal to you and your music too. I wasn't going to do this right away, but I'm going to do this right now. Throw this Facebook post from November 10th from John Rich Music up there. And John, I won't read the whole thing here, but what you have here is a bit of a testimonial to your respect for and your love for your grandfather and his service. Go back down to the text there a little bit about his service in World War II, but then specifically in all of the other, and all the other causes. And this was in an introduction to your video and song that you wrote called "The Man."
Well, he was one of the millions who signed up to defend us long ago in 1941. And when they sucker punched us in Pearl Harbor, he fought under MacArthur 17 with an Army Thompson gun. Well, he stormed a lot of beaches, slept in jungles with the leeches. He saw things a young man should never see. And when they shot him in the shoulder, he got back up and he marched forward. Left a lot of brothers dead in Kwajalein. And if it wasn't for the good Lord and the man, there wouldn't be a breath of freedom in this land. When I see people on my TV taking shots at Uncle Sam, I hope they always remember why they can. 'Cause we'd all be speaking German, living under the flag of Japan, if it wasn't for the good Lord and the man. If it wasn't for the good Lord and the man.
Travis, tell me, or excuse me, Travis. I was talking about Travis Mills.
I'm John, not Travis, and you're Bob, not Frank.
We're even. Beautiful. Love it. Love it. But I am going to ask you about Travis Mills later, because I know you were in Northeast Ohio supporting his foundation too. So that's phenomenal. But John Rich, tell me why that was so personal to you. That song is beautiful. I love the fact that you sang it to about a dozen or two of American warriors and heroes in honor of your grandfather. Tell me where that comes from.
Yeah, so that room you see in that video is filled with veterans. We actually had 3 World War II veterans, which are few and far between these days, especially ones that are still upright and can function well. And so we actually found 3 of them right here in the Nashville area that came out. One was Army, one was Navy, and I referred to one as Air Force, and he corrected me. He's 101. He said, not Air Force, son, Air Corps, because there was no Air Force back then. So he had all his fire, still in him. And then there were veterans from Korea, Vietnam, Iraqi freedom, Desert Storm. We literally had veterans from every major conflict that America's been in since World War II. So I had the great, I call it privilege and advantage of growing up, spending a lot of years around the old man, around my granddaddy, who we call Papa Rich. And, he's a World War II vet, was fought in the Pacific. And Some veterans won't talk about the war at all, and some will talk about it all the time. Well, he was the second version. He talked about it all the time. And so I grew up hearing these graphically detailed stories about what these guys were having to do to beat the Japanese in his situation. Um, and when you grow up around a guy who was literally there and literally saw it, smelt it, dealt with it, it impresses upon you the amount of sacrifice and danger that he was in, and then the after effects. I mean, he didn't sleep good the rest of his life. No joke, the rest of his life. My other granddaddy fought in Germany. When he came back home, him and my grandmother had to sleep in separate rooms till the day he died because he would wake up every night, literally in a cold sweat, having nightmares about fighting the Nazis. So when you grow up around that, man, you have such a strong sense of what that was and how important that was and how it should be remembered. And I don't think people remember them enough. So this song in particular was about the greatest generation, how they are the shoulders that we've all been standing on since the 1940s. And I firmly believe now in 2023, in the current era, we are the shoulders now that have to stand up. We are the shoulders that the next generations are going to stand on. I believe our country is at that crossroads that if you're ever going to stand up, folks, this is the time to do it, because people with your last name who you will never meet, who will be born in the future, are going to look back on this era of time in the United States, and they're going to wonder what their family was doing to rectify the situation.
Yeah, that's well said. I want to talk about the modern military, but I want to go back to one of the stories your grandfather told you. You said he was one of those, he was the second variation who talked about it all the time and told you some horrific stories. Tell us one of them. And I do that not to pry, I'm sure it's very
Yeah.
personal to him and maybe to you, but you just said it. For the younger generation to remember it, they have to know it. They have to know exactly what it was like to go save the world, which your grandfather did. Give us one of those.
So he was a small built guy. So he was about 5'4", 5'5", 115, 120 pounds at 17 and 18. He actually lied about his age, told him he was 18 when he was 17 so he could get in and go. And so when they got him in the Army and basic training, they realized this guy was a deadly accurate shot and was really just vicious. I mean, he's from Glasgow, Kentucky, just an absolute vicious American hillbilly is what this kid was. So they put him into units now that would be referred to as tunnel rats, special forces units. And his job was to find the caves that the Japanese were hiding in. And he would go into this cave, short range flamethrower, grenade belt, a 45 Colt, on his hip. And his job was to flush the Japanese out the other side of the cave. Well, by doing that over and over and over, he sustained multiple injuries, had multiple Purple Hearts. He was hooked on morphine for 2 years when he got back home. There was nobody to help him. There was no such thing, or at least they didn't refer to it as PTSD. They had no name for that, but he certainly had it. And so, going through, can you imagine? I mean, crawling into a dark cave
No.
on a Pacific island. And so I'd ask him, I said, so what's the technique there? I mean, how do you do it? He said, you hit it with a short range flamethrower, which burns all the oxygen out of it, burns up anybody that's close. You lob a few hand grenades down in there, let those go off, let the smoke clear, then you start moving through the tunnel. That's how you start. And he said in the tunnels, it's booby trap, punji sticks, all kinds of, grenades hanging on wires. I mean, you name it. Horrible, horrible things. And, with all that, the guy still had a great personality, was funny, would cut up with you all the time. But, man, right behind those eyes, you could see it. I mean, deadly serious about his country and about the direction it was headed. So, for me, I think, like I said, that's a great privilege and honestly an advantage that I have over a lot of people is that I got to grow up around a guy like that and really have firsthand knowledge. And as a songwriter, I'm able to write those lyrics and try to put you in his position as the listener and try to imagine what that must have looked like, hopefully to gain more respect and appreciation for what they did.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to hear that story, man. That's because that's what I'm talking about. And what really brings it home, John, is you said he's 17 when he went in. He had to lie, and there were a lot of guys then who did that. They wanted to go, after what happened at Pearl Harbor. And it's you and I are talking the day after Pearl Harbor Day, by the way, and so it's obviously fresh here. But 17 years old, he went to war to save the world, to save his country. I'm trying to think of today's 17-year-olds. Can you imagine today's younger generation. These are the Gen Z kids. And I'm not trying to sit here and be the old guy, get off my lawn type things. And you young whippersnappers don't know anything. But I see a very different type of mentality in the young men, the 17-year-olds of today. And I'm thinking if Pearl Harbor happened right now, I don't know if this is the greatest generation to go and save the world. Do you see a difference?
Well, it's not, and honestly, it's to some degree no fault of their own. The
That's
last
true.
20 or 30 years, these public schools that these kids go to have indoctrinated them to hate their country, to think America is evil, that's an evil influence in the world, and that America is not worth fighting for, and that an American flag should trigger you every time you see one, and on and on and on. They have been not only the 17 and 18-year-olds today, their parents were also taught like that, a lot of them. So you've got multi generations of Americans now on the younger side that have gone through that indoctrination camp known as public school and the internet and everything else they're exposed to.
Yeah.
So I will say this on the flip side, I visit Army bases and military bases pretty often. There's a big one here called Fort Campbell. Fort Campbell, Kentucky is about 70 miles from where I'm sitting right now.
Mhm.
And I go up there pretty often. And when you see how young those soldiers are, these guys and these girls, they're not 17, but they're 18 to 22, most of them. I mean, they are fresh-faced kids, look like they just got out of high school because they did, most of them.
Yeah.
And they decided to take the best years of their life, the youth of their life, and put it towards service to the country. And there's tens of thousands of them at Fort Campbell alone. So there is a section of young people probably that were raised similar to that I was raised, that understand the importance of serving their country. The rest of them that don't understand it, that think their country is terrible and evil and they wouldn't fight for it, unfortunately, it will take immense amounts of pain and threats to their freedom, literal threats to their freedom, for them to ever realize how important it is what they actually have. They don't appreciate what they have because they've never known anybody that was ever in a position to actually lose their freedom. Never met anybody like that. They've never traveled to another country where they have no freedom. They don't understand what a situation would even look like without freedom. So they are anesthetized pretty much to the talking point of, hey, you could lose your freedom. They go, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to keep playing my video game and living on my parents' insurance. They don't understand. And I think this country's headed in a direction right now. Listen, you let China go off, let Russia move on another country, watch Joe Biden institute a draft. Let's see how the young people respond when Joe Biden, who they support to a large degree, institutes a draft in the United States. Can you imagine? That'd be quite a litmus test to see where we're at.
How would you feel about that? Not just the draft, but let's just say we start taking, still with our all volunteer military, and we start sending kids to stop China from going into Taiwan, or start sending them over to help the Ukrainians fight Russia, or into Israel to fight Hamas. How do you feel about American kids going in other places, not our homeland, to die?
Well, I think if our homeland was intact and our homeland was not under assault and our homeland was not incurring an invasion right now, not only across our borders, but also internally with the people that already live in this country that wish ill upon our country, then maybe you could think about sending American soldiers to another country to stop tyranny from moving forward. But right now, I think Americans on the left and the right are realizing, hey, we got our own problems right now. Why isn't our military down on the border? We have fentanyl in every single zip code of the United States right now. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, or otherwise, somebody who has died from a fentanyl overdose. I know two of them. One was a family member, one was a son of a friend of mine. It's everywhere. And so we're all being assaulted by the same thing. And again, I will say this, I believe unity will happen in America when our shared pain becomes unbearable. When the things that we're all getting hit with, forget the talking points and what we argue about culturally. How about actual physical problems in the country that affect every single family out there? And we are on a straight path towards that right now. And like I said, unfortunately, you can tell a little kid, hey, don't touch that stove, it'll burn your hand. You can tell him that 100 times in a row. And until he touches that stove and burns his hand, he's not going to fully believe you were telling him the truth. And I think that's the direction our country's headed. It's a big wake up call coming in the near future, I think.
It's kind of similar to the "we need another 9/11 to bring the country together" crowd. I hear a lot of people say that because look at how we unified after 9/11. Everybody put their differences aside, but the reality is, 3,000 dead Americans and everything that came along with it. That unity lasted like 10 minutes. I mean, seriously, it was not long at all before, of course, we're going into Iraq, and now there's a big battle about whether or not we should have, and it was right back to the same old divisions again. I wonder how long shared pain, like you're talking about, would actually bring people together. I wonder if it's too divided that it'll never come together.
It's a good question. Time will tell. If we can't, under whatever circumstance brings it about, get back on the same page with each other enough to at least say, hey, if it got down to it, I've still got your back, neighbor. Even though you've got that sign and I've got this sign, if we can't get back to that, then we're just treading water until the country literally falls on its knees. And I pray to goodness that doesn't happen.
Do you have any worry about your political activism, and I don't even know if I'd call you an activist, but you're very outspoken, as you said, and its impact on your career? And I say that through the lens of, how many of us have said, man, I didn't come to a rock concert or a country concert to hear a political speech any more than I would turn on C-SPAN and expect to see music, stay in your lane kind of a thing. Do you worry about that, being as vocal as you are?
Yeah. So when people come to a concert, if it's a big and rich concert, we don't talk about any of that. We talk about America, talk about how much we love our country. And boy, those crowds, man, they feel the same way. We bring veterans out and active duty out onto our stages every single show and acknowledge their service. Outside of the concert world, no, I'm not concerned about it at all. And here's another thing. I'm not a political activist because I think there's as many guilty Republicans as there are guilty Democrats. I think it's two wings of the same bird. The uniparty, as a lot of people would call it. I've seen that firsthand. I've sat in back rooms after big events with Republicans. You get a couple of cocktails in them and hand them a cigar, and it gets late enough at night, they'll start talking in ways that they would not talk like that on television, and they'll talk about things that they want to do and see come to pass that I absolutely do not support. So I've learned over the years the hard way, hey, be real careful who you support. Just because they talk the talk and walk the walk like you do does not mean they're the real McCoy. A lot of imposters out there, and I think that's another good thing that's happening right now is the American public in general, both sides of the aisle, are starting to really get an inside look as to how they have manipulated the American public for so many decades and kept us in the dark and moved us around like herds of cattle and sheep. That's starting to change right now. I believe some folks refer to it as the Great Awakening, and I do believe that's a real thing. I know even for myself, I've woken up to a lot of things that I just couldn't believe I never saw that, but they did a damn good job at keeping me in the dark. And you too, and everybody else. So
You're right.
as time goes by, I hope more and more layers get peeled back. Why don't we have Epstein's client list right now? Why don't we have that? I can tell you why. You want to know why you don't have Epstein's client list? Because there are Democrats and Republicans on the list. If
Agreed.
Donald Trump was
100%.
on the Epstein clients list, you would have already seen it. It would have been on the front page of the New York Times. Okay. But he's not on the Epstein clients list, and the people that are on it do not want that to be seen. And they are both sides of the aisle. They are people that we probably have supported or support even right now and have no earthly idea that that's really who they are. That's why that list still hasn't been seen. But things like that need to happen. America can handle it. Tell us the real truth, and we will deal with it appropriately.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't disagree with a single word you just said, with the exception of maybe just the part about the country music label. I mean, you're right. There are just as many bad Republicans as there are bad Democrats, uniparty members, and so on and so forth. But the stereotype in your world, in your genre, is it's much wider than all the other genres of music. Rednecks and hillbillies are conservative, and they're the ones that Barack Obama talked about clinging to their guns and their religion and shopping in their WalMarts and so on. Country music, as a matter of fact, what do you think of Maren Morris? She left. She was a country music singer, and she said, I'm sick of this circus show that country music is, which was too conservative-minded for her. So she said, I'm going to go do pop, I guess. I don't know what she's going to do, but she wanted to get out of that stereotype.
Yeah, I'm glad she left. And I'm glad, it's like when people say, if Donald Trump becomes the president, I'm leaving the country, and nobody ever does. Well, good for Maren Morris. She actually did exit. You know, she stuck to her guns. Now, if she puts out another single in country music, we'll have to call BS on that. But as of now, I think she's actually stepping into another genre and going to get out of here. So that's good. I'm not going to miss her at all. In country music, most country music fans do not realize that all the country music record labels, which is where your favorite singer is signed to and has a contract with, here's what they are: Sony, Universal, Warner Brothers. That makes up about 90% of all the record labels, these big conglomerates. Now, do those companies sound familiar to you? Aren't those the same companies that run Hollywood? Those
Yeah.
are the same companies that control tech, and those are the same countries that control media and all those other things. Yeah, it's the same exact companies. They also run Nashville, Tennessee. So you've got a lot of country artists and songwriters that want to put out songs and say certain things about what's going on in the country, but their labels will not allow those songs to be heard. For me, I no longer belong to a company. I don't have a publishing deal, a record deal. I don't have anybody that can tell me what I can and cannot write and sing and say. So it's a real, I look at that as somewhat of a responsibility for all the other artists that can't say what they want to say. They're tied up in big record deals. I get calls all the time and text messages from people when I'll put out a new song. They go, dude, thanks for putting that song out, man. I wish I could sing something like that. You go get them, man. Keep it up. You know, and I get these back channeled kind of messages because they can't even go out in the public and say that they would support a song like that without being canceled at country radio or their record label doing something to them. It's quite a situation, man, but I am not a part of their situation. I'm a part of my situation. And I think that's what being an American's all about. You got to know when to cut bait and move on your own speed, stand up on your own feet, say what you really think. Not everybody's going to like it, and that's okay with me.
Ryan, pull up that song. Got about 15 seconds of a song that I think you're referring to right now that nobody else who's on one of those labels, one of those conglomerates you talked about, could possibly do this. Let's pull this up.
And I'm offended, you're offended, let's all get offended tonight. I'll order us a beer, we can sit down right here and scream and yell and cuss and fuss and fight.
You must have triggered so many people with that song and with that video, particularly with the little guy there. You just don't care. You couldn't do that if you were under one of those labels, could you?
Oh, I could make the video. You would just never see it. I mean, they would never let you. The song's called "I'm Offended." You can download that song. It is hilarious. Go watch the whole video. It is so ridiculous. And you know, that's a song I wrote about how stupid our culture has gotten, that everybody's offended about everything all the time. I said, yeah, I'm going to write a song about that because nothing's funny anymore in the world, but that actually is funny to me. So I wrote that song. That's why you got to be independent, man. I mean, if you're wanting to say things like I say things, and there are others out there that want to, you got a real decision to make at that point. I feel bad for them because these artists, this is their American dream. They moved to Nashville. They practiced and worked their whole life to get good enough to get a record deal. They finally get one. And then they find out that the corporate music world is not going to let them have any freedom of speech or artistic expression whatsoever.
Yeah, and John, look what they did to Jason Aldean. Look what CMT did to Jason Aldean. What did you think of CMT saying we're not going to put? And by the way, it was only the video they complained about there too, right? I mean, because if you just sort of try that in a small town, you hear the lyrics, nobody's really gonna be bothered much by it. But then they showed the video of some of the riots and saying, this is what happens in the big cities. That stuff doesn't fly in a small town. And suddenly that's racist and everything else. What was how did you respond to all that?
Well, they don't like being called out. They don't like having to look at what they're actually responsible for. That's too much. CMT, that's about the stupidest thing I've ever seen a network do. Honestly, that's right up there with Bud Light. That CMT and Bud Light. I mean, they ought to start their own deal. CMT.
You don't sell Bud Light, do you? At the Redneck Riviera in Nashville?
Everybody stopped buying it. You don't
even stock it, right? If somebody orders one, they're out of luck.
You can't get it, but nobody orders one anyway. So, I mean, yeah, it was our number one beer. And when all that happened, we went 7 days. It did not sell one can of it. We actually did an exercise where we stuck a ice bucket of Bud Lights out on the bar, and it said free beer. And by the time the bar closed late at night, 2 a.m, the ice was all melted. All the cans of beer were still sitting in it. Nobody would even take a free ice down Bud Light. So at that point, I said, okay, we got to get it out of here, man. Nobody's buying this stuff. But CMT's done the same thing. You know, this liberal music industry, they used to be smart enough to know just to, you know, don't bring this crap onto TV or onto the radio, because a lot of your audience, that's not who they are. How about just play songs and play good videos and just do that? But now their arrogance and their ideology has gotten the best of them, and now they're forcing it right down your throat. And what they're finding out is that the whiplash effect is unbelievable. You know, cancel culture. To cancel somebody, to me, means that one person or one company or a small group of people decide unilaterally just to turn you off. Cancel. They can just do it with a button. When the general public decides to stop spending money on your product or stop watching your network, that's not cancellation. That's capitalism.
That's right. That's well said. That is exactly right. Well, you are not just walking it or talking it, I should say. You're walking it every step of the way. John Rich, I'm going to play show one last picture up here, because everybody who watches this show saw and heard the Travis Mills story. I don't know if you can blow that up, Ryan, at all, but
Yep.
But yeah, you appeared here. You walk it. You show up. You go to foundation. You support the Travis Mills Foundation. You support a lot of organizations, and you don't just do it from your ivory tower in Nashville. You go out on the road, and you go to places like Northeast Ohio, where we originate from, and you perform for things like this. That's so important. Tell me what the Travis Mills Foundation. How'd you get hooked up?
Well, Travis Mills is the walking, talking embodiment of what it means to be an absolute national treasure and hero. Now, he won't say that about himself, but you're talking about a guy that lost all of his limbs, comes back home, figures out how to still get around and be mobile, and then decides he still wants to serve his fellow man and his fellow service member, and builds this whole organization, the Travis Mills Foundation. I mean, I find him to be one of the most, if not the most inspirational person in America.
Yeah.
When it comes to patriotism and what that man stands for, he is the reason that you never kneel for the national anthem, ever. I don't care what you think is wrong with the country. There's plenty wrong with our country, but Travis Mills ain't wrong with our country. And when you have that American flag at the top of that flagpole, you salute that. You put your hand over your heart, because it is in respect to men just like him.
Amen to that. John, yeah, and Travis, by the way, he has got no legs, and he still finds a way to walk the walk. That's pretty impressive.
He's got no legs, and he would still kick your ass. I'll put it to you that way.
That too. Yeah, I've seen some videos of him scrapping and getting on the mat with people. So it's pretty amazing. Hey, John, thank you for taking the time coming on with us. Thank you for doing what you're doing. You're a patriot. You're obviously a phenomenal talent too. We are big fans of you here. Thanks for doing this, and hope we can chat again.
Hey, I'd love to, man. Thanks for the time. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you. So that's going to put a wrap on this one. That's an entertainer that you can get behind. And I'm not a big fan of people who are in the sports world or in the music world bringing all of their politics in or bringing all of their causes in. But when all of their causes are righteous, such as helping out wounded veterans and helping the heroes of war, supporting the Folds of Honor, I can get behind that no matter who is doing it. So that's John Rich, and this is Strictly Speaking. Thanks very much for watching. Let us know what you think. Leave a comment in one of the comment sections below where you're watching this video, and we'll see you next time. I'm Bob Frantz.